Thank you so much for joining us today. So my name is Anasazi Ochoa. I'm the managing news editor for Dig en Español. Cal State Long Beach is bilingual publication. And we're so happy that you were able to join us for this discussion as part of our initiative for Black History Month. We wanted to have an open discussion on not just the identity of Afro-Latinidad, but also the relationship between the Black and the Latinx community. So, and I want to also start by thanking Kadie Gurley of the Daily 49er to join us today and help me in moderating this discussion. We want to start off by just presenting the issue of the fact that there is a strained relationship between the Black and the Latinx community. Kadie, do you want to start by sharing your initial thoughts?
Sure. The term strained, to me at least, means, here's the background of what I feel. I feel like both African American and Latinx communities, we've had our own struggles, and I feel like we should be each other's allies in certain cases. I feel, bring unity across both communities. However, I feel like there's so much stuff going on in the world that kind of strains us away.
I think also what Kadie and I were saying the other day too, is that it seems as though there is kind of this sort of generational stigma that has been passed down, well, at least from what I've experienced within my own community, which is crazy because one would think that these two groups would be more united in the sense that while we do have different lived experiences, we also fall under the umbrella of white supremacy, and we are able to share in the struggles of what it is to be part of a marginalized community in the United States.
I feel that a lot of us, a lot of Black and Brown people, we grow up in the same community, via our history in the United States of redlining. Our communities, we lack the resources when we're not included in the census, and how our school is going to improve, how our infrastructure in our community is going to improve if we're seen as less than a person. I see this divide when we were compared to, say, Asian Americans, who are seen as the model minority, and then they pit Black and Brown communities against each other, especially Black and Black and Black and Brown. And so when we keep on fighting each other over things that ultimately don't matter, like habitat or property or shit that just don't matter, then we are ignoring the larger issue of why we're in this position to begin with, which is the white man putting us in this position. And I feel like over generations of our communities, just via the diaspora coming to the United States, we already are coming to this country with these notions of a racial, a post-racial society in Latin America, that there's this belief that oh, okay, well, there was segregation in the United States. America is the issue, but in Latin America, race is, we're over that. And that's not the case. So when you come in with those mentalities to the United States and multiple generations go on kind of thinking that same thing, we end up with that J Balvin music video where Black women are on leashes and he is kind of the person taming them, so to speak. It's tiny things like that where we have to kind of, as a community, speak up and hold others accountable, because what may have been seen as acceptable maybe 10 years ago, 20 generations ago, is not something that we're trying to continue to uphold in this generation.
I think there's just still the notion where you guys explain about this competition, who is better. I remember when the Black Panther 2 came out. I just recently saw it last week, but when it came out in theaters, there was this fight among the Black and Hispanic community or Latinx community about we beat you or blah 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 and stuff like this. So it kind of still divided us more which is unnecessary because like it's a movie that represents all of us, right? Both of us. And whether it doesn't matter who's the villain or not, it's like we're showing representation, especially for like the darker skin Hispanics who don't get that representation in the movies. But it's still like this fight among the community, which I think is still a problem.
Both remarks were related to like film and TV, and it's crazy because society gets so heavily influenced on these, it kind of becomes our like in real life situations. Unfortunately, they in films it portrays us being against each other, and it kind of like correlates to real life. So I feel like those are two good points on how social media, film, TV, everything, music, things like that can influence all those type of strains that are put on both communities. Sometimes like some of those like I guess per se self-identity, more so conceptions that we get about certain cultures comes from our families, believe it or not. Like growing up, as a child, I had to educate myself, educate my family on certain things, what to say, what not to say, respecting different cultures, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's crazy like when you actually like become more aware of just the anti-Blackness that is rampant within like the community, and you call it out. Like, I mean, from my own personal experience, like I've had family members that use nicknames for like just other family members that are rooted in just anti-Black sentiment, like for example, like calling someone prieto or calling someone chato, like that's all stems from like what their features look like, whether it's having like a wider nose or having just more of a darker complexion. And there are also terms that are rooted in indigeneity too, but just like I think anti-Blackness is like the prevalent just issue that occurs at least like within the Latino community, Latina community. And yeah, I think it really starts with us as, a younger generation and saying, when do we want it to stop, and just making a change.
The spread of misinformation can like directly affect these communities, especially like these rhetorics. And I'm not even talking about like one community going from the other. I'm talking about specifically outside communities affecting the Black and Latinx communities. Like, oh, Black people commit 50% of the crimes, or all Mexicans are rapists and stuff like that continue to be circulated around the media and social media, and people don't like, they just go with the flow. They don't fact check. I mean, obviously, how can you fact check that? That's like completely wrong. But they just automatically believe it without like questioning stuff, without like, learning new stuff, and they just like take it into consideration. And ultimately, this can just have a continued effect on these communities, especially those low income and underfunded, with barely access to healthcare and along the lines like that. So it's like important for people to understand how to check for information, understand that these rhetorics are harmful, and just be educated on that.
What are the solutions moving forward? How do we want to better not just like our communities, like for our current generation, but for future generations? And how do we sort of bridge that gap of that strain that has existed for so long between the Black and the Latinx community?
It literally starts with us. A lot of the newer generation we gotta kind of relate to what they're looking at and what they're doing. Obviously, we're in the age of TikTok, social media. I mean, having like events, gatherings, things like that. Offering them to come to some of our like gatherings to educate themselves, and us going to some of other events as well. I feel like can help, but educate, and also like educate, your parents, things like that. It's from my personal experience, my family like kind of like brainwashed me to think certain things growing up, and you just have to break the cycle and literally break the cycle. And I feel like we just have to come together, and also like we have to be the change, so there can be a change in media like television and things like that. I'm tired of seeing you know film directors and things like that like putting us apart in films, making us uh portray as weak and not capable of holding your own, coming together, unifying, things like that. I feel like there should be more perseverance.
I just wanted to first touch base on what Kadie had mentioned, where she said that starts with us. And I think it's also about us creating boundaries when it comes to like what is allowed and what's not, like respecting each other's boundaries, especially when it comes to the N-word, like the N-word. Like honestly, I'd rather not, even Black people not say it, because I just don't think, it needs to be said anymore. But like, because in the Latinx community, it's like heavily said. And then, we say, don't say it, but it's like, oh, well, my Black friend told me to say, or something like that. And like, I'm your brother, like we share. No, it's a boundary set. And also, I think, my boyfriend's parents are from Mexico. One is from Nayarit and one is from Jalisco, right? And they have like their different like terms on what they say about Black people, what you had mentioned. And so like my suegra, she like told me, well, I'm gonna like, I might call, my grandchildren, like I think the term is chonguito, like little monkey or something like that, because they're gonna be like acting wild and stuff, and like, or like certain like phrases that, the grandparents, the great grandparents might call, our children and stuff like that, depending on like the future, if they're like darker skin tone. And so just like no, I don't want you like having that. I don't want that like description of my children. Just call them, little cute names like puppy or something like that, something cute, like, or like, but not like something that attributes like into like a deeper, racist attitude, even though it's like part of your culture. It's like something that's like not necessary to like refer to someone of a different ethnicity or race or something like that.
Really quickly on what Lola mentioned about setting boundaries, that's very important. I feel like, sometimes you can't be passive on certain things that people comment on, side conversations of like, perhaps saying the N-word or saying other word slang that's inappropriate in the Latinx community as well. But sometimes we just can't be passive. We have to confront the problem and educate them, like I mentioned before. But I really strongly agree with what Lola mentioned about setting boundaries. It's very important, because if we don't, they're gonna pass it on to someone else, and they're gonna think that's okay, and they're gonna run into the wrong person one day maybe. But that's why it's my responsibility to educate them so they don't have to make that mistake and learn from it.
Well, honestly, I'm so happy with how this discussion turned out. We got a lot of great perspectives. And again, like, thank you so much, Kadie, for helping us out with this and for agreeing to lead the discussion with us. I really hope that we can have more discussions like this in the future. We definitely will plan some in the months ahead.